Welcome to our first stream. My name is Chris.
I'm Pat.
And we're hanging out tonight. We're going to be having a really cool conversation. We're starting this thing. We don't know what it is. We're figuring all that out. But I'm going to let Pat explain that to you guys and Pat, why don't you explain to the good people that are watching exactly what we think we're doing?
So our podcast is called I Know You Didn't Ask, and I think that's very much in line for who me and Chris are. Personality-wise, we love talking. We love talking to people and telling stories and explaining things. That's what brings us joy. We're content creators, and recently Chris was helping me set up my new camera that he gave me. And we were just looking at it. I was like, damn, I look really good. You look really good. I was like, why don't we just go live somewhere and just, I mean, how hard is podcasting? We should just talk about something. And we've been having a conversation a lot lately with the end of COVID in sight and a lot of things opening up, movie theaters. And for me personally, it was like one of the first things I was waiting for to come back, and I was very excited for it, and I was very eager to get back to the movies. So we thought it'd be a really good conversation to have here with all of you and hopefully get your input. And we'll take it from there.
Yes. So we are talking tonight about movie theaters. Will movie theaters make a comeback? Are they going to come back? We've done some limited research. We listened to a podcast. We might have looked up a couple of articles, but that's the one thing that about this podcast is, me and Pat are two guys that are going to talk about topics that we have no credentials to talk about. We are not
unqualified.
We are unqualified, 100% unqualified. Yeah. I don't even know that we're qualified to be podcasting, but we are, but you got to start somewhere. And we're just going to be talking about topics that we have really interesting conversations about, and that we want to, like Pat said, we want to bring to the masses, to whoever will give us a chance to listen. So we're excited to get this conversation started tonight about movie theaters. And so Pat, the question of the night, are movie theaters post-pandemic going to make a comeback? Are we going to see those big box office weekends like we've seen in the past? Hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in a single weekend for a single movie. Is it going to happen again?
So, I want to say yes, that I believe they will. So, I remember the first time I went to a megaplex, Clifton Commons opening weekend. Our parents took me and our sister Casey. We were 9 years old in 1999, and they had just opened. It was $1 a movie, and my parents took us and saw Blast from the Past with Brendan Fraser and Alicia Silverstone. And I remember that so vividly. I remember going in there. There was an arcade. There was a neon. There was 10 snack stands. It was packed with people. It was the first time I'd ever seen the stadium seating in a theater, and it blew my mind. And from that point forward, I was hooked on movie theaters. It was the only place I ever wanted to be. Me and, my closest friend, Mike, who we call Newsy, we spent days, literally days, at Clifton Commons. My father would drop us off for a Saturday afternoon matinee. It was $5, and I'd have 10 or 15 bucks in my pocket that he gave me, and we go and we pay for one movie ticket, and we would just spend the rest of the day at the theater going in and out and watching movies. And it was my favorite place in the entire world. And honestly, since in the 20 years since then, there's been a wild and rapid decline. And I think it only started in maybe the last, 10 years, you started to see a mass decline in people going to the movies. And it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, but that's interesting. But isn't that so the podcast that we listen to, and we'll link it in the description down below. It's called 99% Invisible. They talked about movie theaters, a kind of a history of movie theaters, and it's interesting that we're talking about we saw this massive decline when in that podcast they talk about the massive decline of the movie theaters in the 90s, right before the megaplexes open. And then the first megaplex opens in 1995. AMC Theater opens their megaplex, and it was this big boom in theaters, especially because of the stadium seating. Because one of the earliest memories that I have about theaters is going to the theater in Paramus. It might have been Rutherford or Ridgefield. The one right next to Fuddruckers on Route 17 in Paramus, New Jersey. And in the podcast, they were talking about how theaters, when after the 60s, during the 80s, they started to becoming like little 6 and 7 plexes, having multiple screens. The podcast talks about theaters splitting up their one screen. Well, that theater, I remember being one of those theaters. I remember sitting in the balcony, and there was like they covered up the orchestra, where the orchestra would be in that theater. And so it's really interesting that we're seeing that same thing happening now, where we saw this decline and then a big boom with the megaplexes, and then we started to see this decline. But now are we gonna see another big boom?
I don't know. Do people care about going to the movies anymore? Like, I have such great memories. Like, I remember going on a summer camp field trip to the really tiny theater on Route 4 and seeing Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
A true American classic. What a fantastic film. Will Smith could have literally done nothing after that. He should have won
an Oscar for that.
He should have won an Oscar for his role in Wild Wild West, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not still bitter about it. But I was talking something else about this recently. Like, I remember the 90s, like when we were kids, like The Mummy, Wild Wild West, Phantom Menace, like all these massive like blockbuster movie releases. And I feel like there's a really big gap until we got the MCU.
That's a good point.
Universe. Because I really just can't think early 2000s, like we had Pirates of the Caribbean and Harry Potter. Actually, what am I talking about? Franchises are forever. They'll never die. That's the thing. Franchises, who are we kidding? Yeah, they're not going anywhere. Hollywood is just going to find new ways to create the same thing, spend hundreds of millions of dollars on it, and jam it down our throats, and we're just going to line up outside the... Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, right? Is like, so we had this boom right after the megaplexes started. They needed all of this content, right? They needed content to put on these screens because we didn't have these big franchises like Pirates and the MCU and Harry Potter. So you get a lot of really incredible films like the podcast was talking about, like Being John Malkovich and these kind of artsy films that aren't going to get a run in movie theaters unless they were released during that time. So the question now is, okay, with movie theaters coming back and with studios not producing the big franchises right now because of the pandemic, they simply cannot churn out movies like they were pre-pandemic. Are we going to get a boom again of like original? Because everything you see right now in the movie theaters is a sequel or
I think it's not, I don't think it's so much a question of if we're going to get a boom. I think it's how long is that boom going to last? Because here's the other thing is that so in that podcast we keep referencing, and we should really add a link to that podcast because
we will.
Incredible. They talk about the 40s was like this golden era of movies, everybody showing up. There's auditoriums that fit like 1,000 people. They have live bands. It's crazy. And then in the 50s, there's a huge drop off because of television. The 50s TV dinners is specifically what they reference. And for the last, 5 or 6 decades, it just fluctuates like this. It goes up, it goes down. We get the megaplexes, and it has this giant surge again. And then the megaplexes is what facilitates the studios going for the big blockbuster franchises. But in all that time, see, people don't realize this, that technology from 1940 to 1999 is not as different as people think it is. It functions better. It looks cooler. It's more accessible. Maybe it's smaller. But the technology really isn't as different as people think it is. It's not until we get into the 2000s and the teens when we get streaming services, super powered computers that fit in your pocket with more processing power than the first moon landing had, So this is also a first time in history that, theaters are going through this ebb and flow with attendance and ticket sales, but they're also competing with something that they've literally never had to compete with before, technology. And it's wild. I think it's the first time we've seen this. So I think the theaters are going to have a boom because people are chomping at the bit to get out and do stuff. I know that I was, and I'm going to the theaters now, and I love them. I'm having a great time. I'm loving it. But how long will it last? Like, is it novelty? Are people just excited to get out of the house and go do something? And then they're going to be like, remember when we were getting Mulan on Disney Plus? Yeah, that was awesome. Let's go do that again. Why would my shoes stick to the floor? Popcorn is $13 a kernel. It's like, why? What are we doing? What are we doing here?
I think
it's on the couch and watch Mulan.
I think that that's not going to happen because it's the same thing that happens every single time the movie theater industry has come up against new technology. They came up against TV in the 50s. They came up against home video in the 90s. And now they're up against streaming. And what I think is that what they've done every time, because this is what I love about the theater, is the experience. I'm sorry, there is nothing that I love sitting at home on my couch and watching shows and binging Apple TV and Netflix, but there is nothing when it comes to consuming content like going to a movie theater and getting your popcorn and getting your soda and sitting in your seat and the massive screen. And I think about, it's so funny. I just saw a TikTok today of that moment in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
When Cap is standing there and then they all come back. And I think about being in the theater for that moment. I don't get that experience sitting on my couch watching Endgame at home.
No.
You don't, like, the first time that you see Captain America after waiting 18 movies to hear him say the words Avengers Assemble and the theater literally erupting. You don't get that. And so I think it's the experience, and all they'll do is they'll adapt to the experience. I do think that we're not going to see people going to the movies massively like we have in the past. I think we'll see big box office weekends. I think we'll see a lot of people going out to the theater, but it's not going to be, our father who grew up in the, came of age in the early 60s, mid 60s, who took a quarter to go to the movie theater every day to catch the cartoons and the double feature. And that's not going to happen because theater, it's just economically, it's not,
How much does it cost to go to a movie now? $30
per person
for a ticket? Yeah, per person. $30 per person to go to
per person to go. And if you're me and my wife and we go, or you're you and a date, or two people, you're talking about, then you're gonna get dinner, you're talking about $100 night, easy, $100.
But so it's an expense. But it's an expense that you're willing to make. Like, you're willing to pay that for the experience of going to the theaters.
Once a week, once a month, maybe not once a week, a couple times a month. Absolutely.
Well, go ahead.
Just like in the 40s before the big boom or after TV came around, I think in the 60s and 70s, when going to the movies became this extravagant thing where you had ushers and tuxedos and take you to your seat and people got dressed up, and that was going to the movie theater.
So I'd like to bring it back to the technology point. And you're right about that. Like, the movie theaters have always come up against the new technology and they've always prevailed. The theaters have always come out on top. But I think the difference is that the technologies that they came up against are essentially, dead or dying mediums at this point. TV, I think we're still a little bit of a ways off, but
that's another conversation we can have.
Is on its way out. And Blockbuster, home video, they came up against home video, which was really problematic for a while there. But there's one Blockbuster left in the world, and you can go watch a documentary about it. Where? On Netflix, which is absurd. It's just absurd. But even that, and it's not like a technology that became, people didn't just build a Blockbuster in their backyard and they were able to get rid of Blockbuster as a franchise. Blockbuster went away, and then they were like, okay, we have nowhere to rent physical movies from anymore. People now have supercomputers, and they're not like your phone's not going anywhere. Your TV with 18 different streaming services isn't going anywhere. Like that is people's lives now. I was at Chipotle today, and I sat down and I was eating my lunch. I propped my phone up on my wallet, and I was watching Twitch. I was watching Nick Merckx, just watching the stream, watching some Warzone, having a good time. And I looked up, and there's 4 other people in front of me, and everybody's on their phone. And I used to be that guy, like, ugh, people on their phones. Like, don't you ever look up? It's like, man, once you look down, it's nice down there. You know what I mean? Coming back up for air, we don't need that. Maybe just a breath real quick, and then right back at it. There's so much content in the world, and it's beautiful. The outside world is weird. We don't need it. But this is technology that isn't going anywhere. And I think theaters will have a boom for a while. I think people just get tired of it, man. I think like because I got excited at first going back, and I'm still enjoying going, but like, you know, I get tired of it. I go and I look at my bank on the next morning. I'm like, damn, $15 for a ticket. Like, why did I get them Raisinets? $6 for a box of candy. Like, it's crazy, dude. Like, nobody takes people on dates to the movies anymore.
Well, how can you?
There's just so many movies out there, and I think there's like such a quick turnover rate too. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man.
I don't know.
You know what? I'm for it. Listen, I will lead. Here's the thing. I will lead the advocacy group to bring theaters back full force and get rid of Netflix, Apple TV, Amazon, Hulu, the works.
Hold on. Listen, you don't need to get rid of them.
No. I will if the movie theaters will make one rule and abide by it. No babies. No babies. Listen to me. If somebody from AMC sees this, here's my voice. You look me in the eyes. I'm telling you, I will fight tooth and nail to destroy Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all of these wannabes. If you swear to me that you will never allow another baby, okay? And I'm not even talking about like infant. I'm talking like maybe 13 and under. No more. We don't need them. We don't want them. Chris, when's the last time you were in a theater with a screaming baby?
It's been like however many months since the pandemic.
Okay.
You know,
you want to know something? They're in every theater I go to. They follow me. There's a coalition of babies that hate me for some reason. I did something in a past life, okay? And whatever higher power was like, you know what? We're going to torture him. What's the best way to torture a guy who loves movie theaters? Oh, babies. Just send babies. Send the army of babies to every theater he goes to. Now, granted, I was seeing a B movie recently. Listen, if you have a child, you have a baby, you forfeit your right to go to the movies.
All right, we're getting a little off topic here. That's not where we're supposed to. We're talking about whether or not the movie industry will come back, the movie theaters, not whether or not they should allow babies in. That could be a topic for another discussion.
Well, I think if they got rid of the babies, they would come back in full force.
Well, I don't think that's what's stopping movie theaters from coming back in full force. But I am with you in the idea of I'm not with you in the idea of getting rid of Netflix, Hulu. I need all of those things. I need Netflix. I need Hulu. I need Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus has some of the best content streaming right now, I believe. I need all those things. But I do want theaters to make a comeback. I love going to the movie theater. Like I said, it's that experience. It's like that time when, you know, when people used to go to the theaters and they'd get dressed up and it was a big deal. It was like going to see a Broadway show. That's what it was like. It was like that time when you make a night of it. So I want that to come back. What?
And even seeing a Broadway show has become grimy. All these poor college students waiting for the $25 tickets to sit in the nosebleeds. Ugh.
It's those $25 tickets got me to
liberal arts college. We don't need you here.
Okay, that's gonna get us. Okay, so I think we should encourage people, right? We should encourage people go out to the movie theaters. We don't want to see the movie theaters die. We don't want to see. We want to see movie theaters thrive, not just survive, but thrive and make a great experience for all of us to be able to go to. So we encourage you to go out to your theaters, go out to your local theaters, go to your megaplexes. go to your local indie theaters and catch an indie film and support all of that, because the only way that it's going to survive is if we go out and support that, right?
And what is your summary of what you see for the future of movie theaters?
My summary is this. If I can sum it up, I think movie theaters are going to change. I think they're going to be drastically different. I think we're gonna see a different experience like we saw when the megaplexes came out. So my summary is that we're gonna see people going back to the theaters, but it's gonna be a different experience. It's gonna be completely different for us. It's gonna be something new, because they have to do that. They have to adapt to the times that we're in order to survive. But the movie theaters and movie theater industry has been incredible at adapting to the times that they're in. So that's my summary. What's your summary? And let's leave the babies out of it.
I think the movie theaters will have another boom. They'll have a bit of a renaissance, maybe. It'll be wonderful again, the movie magic experience, but I don't think it'll be short-lived, but it will not be forever. I think it's going to be probably the last hurrah for movie theaters. And I'm not talking like 2 or 3 years, it may be 10, it may be 20 years from now. But I think 20 years from now, movie theaters will be a very novelty thing to do. I think it'll be very niche, very novel, and people will spend $30, $40 on a movie ticket, and they'll take their kids and they'll say, this is a movie theater. This is where we used to have to go to see new movies when they were released. And that's what it'll become. No longer the days of megaplexes in every town and every city. I think that's where it's headed, and it's sad. It really does make me sad. I'm going to enjoy it while I can, but that is my honest belief. It's a dying business model. It's just not going to work for anybody.
It's like a museum.
Yeah, it's why being like a museum. Like, people just aren't, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, people who rail against change. Like, I'm not disparaging the people I saw in this Blockbuster documentary on Netflix, but these people who still, are patrons of the last standing Blockbuster, I think it's in Oregon, they're devoted to going to a storefront and renting a physical copy of the highest, greatest Blu-ray, which also is a dead medium, but they're devoted to it for whatever reason. It's nostalgia for them, and it makes them feel good. And I get it. All power to you, man. Like, do whatever you enjoy, but they're just hanging on to it. And there's no reason to keep things like that alive for the sake of the few who truly believe in it. I mean, it is what it is, but things come and go. And I think movie theaters are one of those things. I think they rode high for a long time, and it's coming to an end eventually.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's like a nostalgia. Yeah. Well, I know Michael Hosier's watching, and he would tell you that nostalgia sucks. So I think you guys would be in the same boat. That the nostalgia is going to wear off.
I love the nostalgia. And like I said, it'll get to a point where guys like you and me, like you're having a baby soon. You're gonna take your kid to the movies when they're 12, 13 years from now. And
no, I'm taking my baby to the movie. Patrick, I'm coming to California. I'm coming to California.
Nobody younger than 13. So when your kid is 13.
Nope. I am bringing my baby to sit right behind you at every single movie that you go to in the future. That is so we're going to wrap it up for the night. I think this was a good first episode. We're not perfect at this. We're not perfect. We're learning these things. We appreciate those of you that watched and took the time to hang out with us here tonight. Nobody commented, but that's okay. You don't have to comment on things and let us know you're here, but that's fine.
We're just happy you're here and watching.
Yeah, so if you're watching on the replay, let us know in the comments. Are there topics that you would like to hear us talk about? Are there questions that you have that we're probably not going to be able to answer, but we'll do a little bit of research and see how we can answer them? Let us know in the comments down below. And Pat, we're going to be back next Wednesday, 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time. What are we talking about next week?
Something that I really wanted to talk about, particularly with an audience. And we're going to talk about video games, but not. We're going to talk from the perspective of two grown men in their 30s, me and Chris, who over the course of the last year, because of the pandemic, you know, I hate to keep, you know, we try not to harp on that, but it is a cause of a lot of things in our new reality. We're grown men who recently got into video games. And we didn't just get into video games. We got into video games. We got into Warzone particularly, and we were playing 7 days a week for months at a time. We were hardcore into it. Yeah. And we just want to talk about that, talk about the experience of two guys like us who are not experienced, you know, video game players, getting into it, why we fell in love with it so much, why it was so addicting, and, you know, what we've come up against and our take on kind of like where the industry is right now from newcomers and kind of semi outside observers.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about how for the first time at 32 years old, I got online to play video games.
Yeah.
It's gonna be an awesome conversation. Thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. I know you didn't ask. Episode number 1. You were the first ones to see it. Whatever that's worth, we don't know yet, but we'll find out together.
We're gonna sell it as an NFT,
and we're gonna sell it. Yeah, we're gonna create our NFTs and, you know, invest in Dogecoin. Don't invest. Do what you want. Do what you want with your money. We're not here to tell you what to do with your money. But all right, that's it. We're leaving. Thanks, guys. And Pat, have fun in California.
Have fun in Florida.
Peace out.